The piano arrived on a Tuesday in November, carried up 3 flights of stairs by 2 men, who charged extra for the difficulty and didn't apologize for the scuff they left on the hallway wall. It was my grandmother's. An upright Yamaha, cream-colored keys yellowed slightly with age, the cabinet dark walnut with a small water ring on the top left corner, where she'd set her tea every morning for 40 years. I hadn't asked for it. When her neighbor called to say the estate was being cleared and did I want anything, I said the piano without thinking. The way you say things when you're not fully inside your own life yet. That was 3 weeks after the funeral. I didn't play. I didn't even open the lid. I put a houseplant on top of it and told myself I'd figure out what to do with it later. Later turned out to be 2 months of walking past it in the dark, on the way to the kitchen, feeling guilty in a way I couldn't entirely explain, until my friend Dara sat on my couch one evening, looked at it and said, "At minimum, get it tuned. It's disrespectful to let it sit like that." I didn't know if she meant disrespectful to the piano or to my grandmother. Either way, she was right. The piano tuner's name was Daniel. He arrived exactly on time, which I noticed because I'd expected him to be the kind of person who ran late. Something about the phone call had given me that impression, a certain unhurried quality to his voice. But he knocked at 9 exactly. And when I opened the door, he was standing there with a leather case and the expression of someone who had already mentally begun the job. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, slightly rumpled in a way that seemed accidental rather than cultivated. He looked at the piano before he looked at the room. "How long has it been unplayed?" he said. "About 2 years, I think. Maybe longer." "It was my grandmother's." He nodded and set his case down and opened the piano, lid with a kind of automatic reverence that I found immediately disarming. He pressed a few keys, listening with his head slightly tilted, then reached into his case for his tools. "It's not terrible," he said, "but it's been lonely." I laughed before I could decide not to. "Can a piano be lonely?" He glanced back at me, and there was something brief and warm in his expression. Instruments that aren't played go out of tune faster. Whether that's loneliness or physics is a matter of perspective. I had intended to go back to my desk and work. I had a deadline and a half-finished document and every practical reason to leave him to it. I made coffee instead, and sat at the kitchen counter where I could see the living room, and I watched him work. He worked slowly and with total absorption. He would strike a key, listen, make a small adjustment with the tuning hammer, strike the key again. Sometimes he'd play a short interval, 2 notes together, and hold very still while the sound decayed. His head slightly bowed as if he was receiving information through some sense I didn't have access to. He moved along the keyboard methodically, unhurried, like someone who understood that the work couldn't be rushed and had made complete peace with that. After about 40 minutes, he paused and turned toward me. "Do you want to hear what it sounded like before?" he asked. "I don't know what you mean." He gestured me over. I left my coffee and came to stand beside the piano. He pressed a key in the mid-range as a clean, clear tone. Then he played the same key on an app on his phone, which gave back a slightly flatter, slightly sadder version of the same note. "That's a recording I made when I arrived," he said, before I started. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. The piano's current note had a kind of presence, a fullness. The recorded note sounded like something apologizing for itself. "Oh," I said. "Most people can't hear it until they hear them side by side." He set the phone down. "Your ear knows when something is right, even when your mind doesn't." He said it straightforwardly, not as a compliment, just as a fact about how ears work. I felt it land somewhere slightly deeper than a fact usually lands. He broke for coffee at 11, and I poured him a cup without asking, which he accepted without making it a thing. He stood at the kitchen counter while I stayed at the table, and we talked about nothing important, the neighborhood, whether the building's ancient, radiators were as unreliable as they looked, they were, a bookshop nearby that he'd noticed walking over. "Do you play?" he asked. "No, I used to, very basically. My grandmother tried to teach me when I was young, but I wasn't patient enough. And now? I haven't touched it since it arrived." He looked toward the piano. "Why not?" I turned my coffee cup in my hands. "It feels like she played it every morning. For decades. It still feels like hers. Like if I play it badly, it's somehow an insult to all those years." He was quiet for a moment. "She left it to you." I asked for it. Same thing. She would have said no if she'd wanted to. It was such a simple piece of logic that it startled me. I hadn't thought about it that way. I had been so focused on what I might owe the piano, the memory, the decades of careful daily practice. I hadn't considered that it had been given freely, and that receiving freely is its own kind of permission. Daniel set his cup down and went back to work without pressing the point. I sat with it. He finished the tuning at noon, which was nearly 3.5 hours, and I had not gone back to my desk. He played a scale slowly, listening to it resolve across the keyboard, then played a simple chord in the middle register, and let it ring out fully before lifting his hands. "It's done," he said. I came to stand beside the piano again. He gestured at the bench. "Try it," he said. "I'll play it wrong." "There's no wrong. It's just sound." He paused. "Sit down." I sat. He remained standing beside me, which I was aware of in the particular way. You become aware of where someone is standing when the space between you has quietly become relevant. "Play anything," he said. "Whatever your hands remember." My hands remembered almost nothing. I found middle C and played a simple 5-finger scale, slowly, like a child. It sounded thin and tentative in the room. "Again," he said. "But don't look at your hands. I'll hit wrong notes." "Yes, play anyway." I looked up at the wall above the piano and played the scale again. Without the visual anchor, I was slightly less careful, slightly less controlled, and the notes came out less timid somehow. Even the wrong ones. "Your posture," he said. And before I had fully registered that he was going to touch me, his hand was between my shoulder blades, pressing gently but firmly. "You're rounding forward. Sit into it." I straightened. His hand stayed for a moment, steady and warm against my back, long enough to feel like intention rather than correction. Then it was gone. "Better," he said. "The sound travels differently when your body is open." I asked him to play something. It came out before I'd planned it. He was packing his case. We had exchanged information about a follow-up visit in 6 months. The transaction was functionally over, but the piano was sitting there, fully itself for the first time since it had arrived in my apartment, and I wanted to hear what it was capable of. "I don't perform," he said. Not defensively, just as a line he'd learned to state clearly. "I'm not asking for a performance," I said. "I'm asking you to play the piano you just tuned. In my living room. With no one watching except me." He looked at me for a moment. Whatever he was considering, he seemed to reach the end of it. He sat down on the bench. He played without sheet music, something I didn't recognize, slow and unhurried, with a particular quality of attention that reminded me of how he'd listened to each note during the tuning. He wasn't performing. He was doing exactly what he'd said he'd do, which was play the piano. But his relationship to the instrument was visible in every phrase. The way he leaned into certain chords, the slight pause before a resolution as if savoring the tension. I sat in the armchair across the room and didn't move. When he finished, the last notes hung in the room for a long moment. He lifted his hands from the keys and looked at them briefly, as if coming back to himself. "What was that?" I said. "Something I wrote a long time ago." He closed the piano lid. "I don't play it often." "Why did you play it now?" He looked across the room at me. The afternoon light had shifted while he was playing, gone softer and more diffuse, and it caught the side of his face in a way that made him look briefly unguarded. "You asked," he said, without making it a big thing. "That's rarer than you'd think." He came back in 6 months as scheduled. And then I called about a stuck key 3 weeks after that, which was a real problem, technically, even if I had noticed it while practicing for 45 minutes. Every morning, something I had been doing since approximately 3 days after he left the first time. He didn't comment on the coincidence of the timing. He fixed the key. He stayed 2 hours. We had lunch after, at the kitchen table, the piano visible through the doorway behind him, and I told him about the piece I'd been learning. And he told me about an instrument he'd been restoring, an upright from the 1920s with a cracked soundboard, and neither of us talked about what we were actually talking about. At the door leaving, he stopped and said, "The Yamaha is going to hold its tune well. You shouldn't need me back for 6 months. I'm sure I'll find a reason before that," I said. He smiled. Not a polite smile, but the kind that reaches somewhere else. "I'm sure you will." He walked down 2 flights before I closed the door. I went straight to the piano and sat down and played the scale again. Slowly, shoulders back, looking at the wall above the keys the way he'd shown me. The room felt different with sound in it. I felt different with sound in it. I played until it was dark. For mature audiences, all characters are adults. All interactions are consensual.